experience has been nothing but positive. Annette has been wonderful. She's on time. She lets me know if there's going to be any changes in the schedule.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I still feel the challenge of being a parent now in today's world is immense. I think that you need support.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Don't be afraid to take that step. Like, don't be afraid to get help, because you might think that you know what you're doing, but it's always okay to have extra support, and don't do it alone.
Give it a try. You got nothing to lose. It's free. I'm grateful that I took advantage because it's something that has put me in touch with my child, or closer to my child and her development.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Part of being prepared is knowing your hazards and taking proper precautions. Visit mendoready.org. On the Know Your Hazards page, you can find hazards for where you work, where you live, and where your kids go to school. On the Plan and Prepare page, you'll find a plan template. It's important to know what you're going to do, what you're going to take with you, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to go, and how to get there.
One great way to prepare is to pack a go bag. Each member of your family should have their own go bag. Visit our website, mendoready.org, to get a list of items that should be in your go bag.
Gathering and organizing important documents before an emergency is an important part of preparedness. So visit mendoready.org today, where you can find a list of important documents that you should have ready near your go bag in case you have to evacuate.
Not every emergency requires people to evacuate. An emergency kit will have supplies for you to remain self-sufficient for 72 hours. Find a list of supplies for disaster kits on our website, mendoready.org.
A prepared community is a resilient community that will recover faster from disasters. So take some time today, visit our website, get yourself prepared so you can be Mendo ready.
Personally, I think everybody could benefit from the home visiting programs.
I think that as a parent now, I'm grateful for support more than I was before.
I filled out that form not knowing what I was doing. I'm very, very grateful that I did it because it's really helping me a lot.
Bueno, creo que por mi parte esperaba algo totalmente diferente, como un programa más frío, por decir algo, no tan cercano a la familia. Y a través del programa nos hemos dado cuenta que también pasa a ser una familia con nosotros porque nos apoya en los momentos difíciles o cuando nos hemos visto en dificultades.
Well, I was a new mom and I had no experience taking care of a newborn.
There isn't like a book on how to raise a kid.
We come from like a lot of family history of, you know, drugs, violence, alcoholism, so we didn't want our daughter to experience any of that.
The thought that a parent was supposed to be loving, nurturing, supposed to be there for their kid, you know, provide food, shelter, joy, and going in, becoming a parent for her, I had no clue how to provide that.
Cómo pensar educarla, ajá. Cómo educar a un hijo y porque pues nosotros nunca es la primera vez que íbamos a ser padres.
What I think parents should know about home visiting is that you can learn a lot of new things and tips and tricks, how to take care of the baby and what to do, and if you're, you know, stuck in a routine and everything being monotonous, like they give you new resources and new tools how to handle parenthood.
It was nice to have them kind of guiding me, even though I was not a first-time mom. I felt like a first-time mom.
It totally blew my mind over time. So much information that I had no idea about. You know, she was straightforward when, you know, teaching me this stuff and answered any of my questions. It's just a really positive experience.
What I think that parents could benefit with the program is just having someone here for you, especially for first-time parents. It can be very isolating and it can be very lonely, and having the home visitor changes that and it feels very good.
For me, having a home visitor is like having a second mom there.
A lot has changed. I'm definitely more knowledgeable taking care of her, and I know that anytime I need advice or help from somebody, I can just call her.
It's just that little positive nudge to, hey, I'm noticing something, you know, let's find a way how to change it. And she's like, you know what, Amanda, let's pick you up, dust you off, and let's go over to, you know, see about either getting your driver's license or seeing about, you know, going to college, see if we can start something for you.
It's totally worth it. Like, even if you're on the fence at first, you don't feel like having a stranger coming in your house and teaching you about your little one, do it anyway. You know, you get the help that you need. You get professional advice on things you may not know about your child. And the fact that the program has no fees or anything, it's all totally free, is fantastic.
Yo creo que si conozco a alguien que está próxima a ser mamá, lo primero que haría sería recomendarle el programa porque te entrega mucho apoyo, mucha información y más que nada como apoyo emocional, una guía, te da una visión diferente de cómo es ser papá aquí, quizás en este país.
Sí, pues es un bonito programa. Porque pues es buena persona la señora y los ha atendido muy bien.
Pensé que nada más iba a ser un programa de orientación quizás para los nuevos padres, pero creo que nos llevamos una linda sorpresa porque Gaby es una persona muy cercana a nosotros, es como parte de nuestra familia, siempre ha estado dispuesta a ayudarnos y a escucharnos con nuestras dudas sobre la paternidad, y en nuestro caso, que estamos solos en este país, ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres, y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente, y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver los distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás, entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar, pero lo veo de la misma forma.
Que hemos aprendido algunas cosas aquí y pues los han ayudado, como este programa los ha ayudado para seguir creciendo a la bebé, como con buenos consejos y así.
Sí, y creo que también ha sido muy importante el tema de apoyarnos con el libro y saber qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa, a veces nosotros vamos a Wellits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro, vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo, a veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras, y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia, sí, para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
El objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien, y que las familias estén bien significa niños felices, niños sanos, y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
She has made me feel like I'm important and I can go at my own pace, and that's all you need sometimes when you're feeling like you got nobody.
It was helpful to have somebody there kind of holding my hand and guiding me and letting me know this is kind of the normal. It felt like I was becoming a new mom, so it was very interesting and helpful, very, very helpful.
You know, there was that self-conscious part of me, like, will I be accepted even though I'm not perfect?
What I like the most is that she really listens.
The support that she gives me is special because she does it with love, and it's it's just natural, you know. That's all I could say. It just feels like somebody that I've known since I was little.
You know, I said to Jeanette, Jeanette, you're supposed to be with me for 5 years. Jeanette said, yeah, I know, I'm going to be with you guys for 5 years. That's when I said, well, I guess I can trust her. She's going to be with us for 5 years.
Yo creo que quizás pasó como a la segunda visita o algo así, como que ya nos presentamos formalmente. Y luego ya creo que en la segunda visita estaba como todo más tranquilo, como muy... como que el ambiente era muy familiar. Entonces... yo me sentí muy cómoda.
Felt like she cared for Sparrow too, and Sparrow really enjoyed it. Yeah, she knew when Gabby came we were going to be making something or learning something, and she'd instantly start digging through Gabby's bags to find out what activity we were going to do.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I think the relationship that we've built has been just, she's a part of the family.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Visit MendoReady.org. It's our one-stop shop for emergency information. You can sign up for emergency alerts, find your pre-established evacuation zone on our current emergencies map, and find hazard and preparedness information.
Imagine you're faced with a disaster such as a wildfire and you're ordered to evacuate. I'll bet you wish you had more time in that moment. Now's your chance to buy yourself that time. Sign up for Nixle and Mendo Alerts on our website, MendoReady.org. Do it today.
If you want your family to be as resilient as possible, it's important to take some time today and visit MendoReady.org, where you can look up your pre-established evacuation zones on our current emergencies map. You can also find important tools to help maintain your situational awareness, such as the Alert California wildfire cameras and the Caltrans road conditions cameras. We hope you'll take some time today to prepare so that your family can be Mendo ready. Thank you.
When I first realized that I was going to be a parent, I was super scared. After 2 or 3 weeks of meeting in the home visiting program, I was totally comfortable with the fact that I was going to have a baby. Yes, I was still scared, but at the same time, I felt like I had some sense of strength behind me.
If I didn't have those resources that Jeanette provided me, I think it would be harder now.
I got into the program and I realized, like, oh, this is nice. And now look at me, I work at a family resource center with parents and families, all this stuff.
I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to meet my home visitor, because without her, I think that I would be 10 steps behind from where I'm at right now.
Pero pues aquí pues ya los enseñan un poquito más cosas que uno no sabía. Cómo cuidarla, cómo desarrollarla, cómo educarla, y pues es algo bien, porque pues cosas que yo no sabía, pues ya usted nos las dijo y todo como consejos, y pues muchas cosas que se aprendieron.
I don't know what's normal for a 22-month-old baby or an 18-month-old baby, you know. When we get together, we usually discuss and get some progress made with the baby. It makes me feel comfortable, and I associate my parenting with her, my home visitor, telling me, yeah, this is going great.
So it's nice to know where they're at, what stage they're at for every parent, and also to give, again, your children that head start in education.
If I had any questions with her, Just call her up on the phone. You know, it was very relatable, very personal. And, you know, with her getting to know my kids, you know, she got to kind of help guide me along the way. I mean, there were so many cool things that I've learned.
I went from a very like rough type of life. I was homeless, and she was able to.
The August 19th meeting of the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting to order. And
Recording in progress.
We'll begin with roll call.
One moment for roll call. Okay, roll call. We have both of those. Roll call. We have Director Crane.
Present.
Director Gasca.
Here.
Director Navarez is not present. Director McNerlin. Present. Director Watt. And Chair McCourty.
Present. Next, we'll move on to approval of agenda. So, okay, been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Roll call vote, please.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca. Director McNerlin.
Aye.
Director Watt. And Chair McCourty.
Yes. Okay, so next we have public comment on items that are not on the agenda. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters that are not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the board. Persons wishing to speak on a specific agenda item should wait until we reach that agenda item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to make a comment? Seeing none, is there anybody online? Okay, so we have, it looks like Beth. Beth, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Just a reminder for the board members to please press your mic when you speak, because we're not getting it yet. We're not getting a lot of hearing from that. Thanks.
Okay, can you hear me when I'm speaking?
Yes, but I didn't hear anyone on the roll call except for you and Director Crane.
Okay, so make sure you're turning your switches on. Does everybody know how to do that? Okay. All right, good. So there are no further public comment. We're going to move on to item 4A, which is just discussion and possible action items, which is staffing, ad hoc committee recommendations and possible action, including direction to staff to prepare an agreement with the City of Ukiah for administration services. Okay, so staffing ad hoc committee will present this time. Are you going to do that for us, Adam?
Yeah, so the ad hoc committee had been meeting to work on the budget during the rate and fee study, and kind of in that conversation and work, we looked at what a lot of other GSAs do, and most GSAs have a member agency admitting the GSA itself. So we started talking amongst ourselves and the member agencies, seeing if that was a possibility to do for our GSA. And so we have been in talks with Sean White from the City of Ukiah about the City of Ukiah taking over the administration of the GSA when our contract with West Yost expires. And so before we got too far down the road with that, we wanted to bring the idea, just the concept, to the board to get a nod or to continue to come up with a contract and an MOU and figure out the details to see if that is something that the board wants to do.
Okay, so would you like to outline some of the rationale?
Yeah, it's a lot of it has to do with cost, that, we're trying to make this as affordable as possible for our community. It's, we did do a lot of work in getting the cost down from what was initially proposed, but pretty much the only cost savings now is in the administration. And so we figured, it just kind of made more sense to have a member agency taking control, because they have a vested interest in controlling the cost. So, we looked, the two obvious was either the County of Mendocino or the City of Ukiah, and just with the City of Ukiah being the largest payer, it's supporter of our GSA financially, and actually selling water, unlike the City of Mendocino, which doesn't have a water right, or they don't have as much skin in the game as the city of Ukiah, so that's why we went with city of Ukiah.
Mm-hmm. This is just a quick question. Looking at our costs from Weston Yost, most of the fees that we pay are north of $200 an hour for managing our meetings and such. What would we expect from the city of Ukiah? Is there any indication yet?
I think Sean might have a better answer for that. I would hope it would be less than $200 an hour. That's generally the hope.
I really wanted to see something in writing from the city about cost before agreeing to go into a contract or pursuing a contract.
Yeah. Well,
some sort of something.
This wouldn't be agreeing. This would just to continue to go forward to work on a contract.
This is kind of a gate for us to open and go through if we think we want to go with the city of Ukiah. That's the discussion today. There's no contract to vote on or anything like that.
I know we're not voting on a contract, but you know, if we're going to put a bunch of man hours into writing a contract, before we write a contract, I would like to know the costs. I'm sure all of you know that I have a little bit of a tainted past with the city managing finances. And so I'm extra cautious at this point, and I always will be. I know they have skin in the game, but they had skin in the game back in my situation as well. 50% skin in the game.
Okay.
So I just want to see numbers. I feel like it would be a better option. I think they can do it more affordably, but I do want I want to see something, and I want it in writing. I want to be reassured by the city that they understand the amount of work that it would entail, that, you know, extra expenses you wanted us to help with that grant, that's going to be an extra, you know, $10,000, things like that come up. So,
well, we do have a template, so let's hear from Sean.
You're on.
I'm on? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, I think we are in a little bit of a cart before the horse, or which way. You know, we haven't put a lot of time into developing a cost estimate for the exact same reason that really Teresa highlighted. We wanted to make sure that folks were open with the concept, and if you're open with the concept, we will definitely dig down and get to the brass tacks. I spoke with Amber a little bit about this even this morning, but we're definitely confident that we can do it for less than what you're paying outside consultants. And I think also at the same time, just have some level of local control that we don't have currently, I see as the two major things. And as far as the scope, you know, before I was here, I've done the single human entity thing before, and I don't think we'll have any trouble. But yeah, obviously, before you sign a contract or get down to the brass tacks, we'll get you an hourly and estimate of what we think it will be. But I think there'll be some cost savings involved.
Other questions for Sean?
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think as Sean has spoken, having a member agency that has local interest in mind and can presumably take an impartial and unbiased position to help the GSA along, I think would be great. Like Director McNerlin, I think it would be good to maybe have an interim step before preparing an agreement, is to see a proposal with the scope of services before we jump to an agreement. So I don't know what the order of operations you were thinking, Sean, but I think having a proposal to look at before we have a vote on an agreement would be good.
Yeah, I think that is what I'm envisioning as well. So if you guys are okay with this concept and approve it, we'll go into detail at the TAC. I was going to get sort of a series of tasks and past hours from Amber. We'll apply hour rates to that depending on who is going to be doing those tasks, and then generate a number after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other comments or questions?
It seems that would be some synergy with the city's involvement with more than just the city's water system currently, with Redwood Valley, which is part of the GSA boundary, now linked up with the greater basin for as a resource that they can rely on instead of where they've been for decades. It seems that the city's got the information that's going to be largely needed, is interest of costs for all, probably the most qualified of the related agencies.
Yeah, as we move forward, our skin in the game is only going to increase. Redwood is primarily surviving on groundwater from Millview at this time, and I see that probably only expanding in the future. Be largely overseeing that operation. A number of our wells are monitoring sites. We have good relationships already with Larry Walker and Associates, who have always been great. So we won't be starting from scratch.
Right.
Scenarios.
And I read this as literally, does this body want to consider the city?
Yeah.
Hence, I view this as a proposal, not an agreement to go farther than the proposal.
Yeah, exactly.
So having proposed language, having proposed structure, seems like that.
Yeah.
All that we need, or we say, yes, we're going to do.
I agree.
It was confusing for me because the recommended action to say directing the ad hoc committee and legal counsel to prepare an agreement. So that's why I thought we were getting a little too far ahead, right? So I agree that we do need a scope of work here and cost estimate. And then, and I believe we have time, right? Our current agreement doesn't expire.
Yeah.
March 2024.
Yeah, we have time. And again, we've got many templates for this type of agreement as well. So we certainly won't be starting from scratch there either. So yeah, I think it's mostly just looking for an official green light on the concept from the actual board before we really jump into things. So
this is an exploration, a commitment.
Yeah, through the chair, my recommendation as staff would be that we, pending the board's direction at this meeting, work with the city to develop a scope and budget proposal that would then be brought forward at your next meeting, at which point you could direct staff to work with legal to develop and have the chair sign off on the contract, and that could be the agenda and action item at the October board meeting, should you so direct.
Does that fit in your time frame, Sean?
yeah, it's totally.
Okay. Now, here's a question for you. So one of the things that we have to do, of course, is deal with the Department of Water Resources on all of the applicable regulations, including preparing an annual report, which is done by our consultant. Do you feel you have the expertise inside of your organization to be able to oversee that and be sure that we're meeting our requirements?
We do mountains of compliance reporting right now, being an urban water supplier. We deal with that constantly. Yes, I'm not worried about that at all.
And you have relations with Department of Water Resources, and
we don't really do any reporting with DWR right now. Almost everything we do is through the state board, but they're all part of the same family, and I'm not anticipating any issues with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so are there any further questions on this proposal to actually have the city of Ukiah submit a proposal to manage?
Proposal for a proposal.
Yeah.
If there's no comments from anyone online, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
The motion is to have the ad hoc committee work with the city of Ukiah in receiving a scope of work proposal and a budget proposal. Bring it back to our board.
By October, next board meeting.
I'm not picky about the time, but I will put that in there if that's what you like, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
I think that would be good to state when. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any. With that in mind, let's have a roll call vote.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin. Aye. Director Watt.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Aye, so motion carries. All right, so next item is the West Yost contract status. And with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Harry to discuss where we're at.
So last time we met, the board elected to defer any action on it. Since that time, I've tried to answer some questions that were posed at that time that I felt in the moment might have caused the hesitancy to execute it. Prepared an email and supporting data for the board. I sent it out a couple weeks ago. I hope you've had a chance to look at that. And my recommendation is, I'm here to listen to find out to what extent you want to continue to engage, work with us. We want to work with the GSA to help it transition successfully to the city of Ukiah. The budget that we had presented was really the authorship of the ad hoc committee. We thought it would take quite a bit more budget to get through the fiscal year, but we acquiesced, and I think our proposal reflects the will of the ad hoc committee. So, I mean, we're here hat in hand. What would you like to do? Would you like to continue to use us in this capacity? And if so, is the letter proposal and the budget prepared there something you're willing to commit to?
Okay, discussion?
Through the chair?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for putting that together, Harry. Nice to meet you. This is my first meeting. So if you'll indulge my questioning, I'm getting up to speed. So this isn't, an interrogation. It's me trying to find out some things and understand. So just looking over the proposal, it seems like the larger level of effort goes into board and committee meetings and contract management. It looks like that's about 350 hours of the 630. And I'm just wondering how you think we can get the best value out of your firm helping us through the end of the year, the end of the fiscal year. It seems like it just seems like the cost is fairly significant, and I know you have your hourly rates that you gave us originally. I know I'm not sure your billing rate, but can you tell me what that is? What do you charge the GSA?
I think my billing rate is just shy of $300 an hour.
Okay. And how many, it looks to me like each meeting that your team does with the GSA, whether that be the ad hoc or the TAC or the committee meetings, is, if I just do straight math, is in the $4,000 range per meeting. Does that seem about right?
That's right.
How do you think we can get that number down?
Well, one idea would be to utilize Beth or some equivalent person to organize the meeting. She, in fact, organized this meeting for the most part. She firmed it up with the County of Mendocino. She wrote the staff report for the Ukiah agenda item. So to the extent you have people willing to step into that role, that would be good. If Amber is, and you point out rightly, the other big ticket item is fiscal and contract management, which is done in QuickBooks, not by a CPA, but by a full charge bookkeeper. And I think to the extent that Amber could be relied on to do more of that, I think you're right on it. There are opportunities to save money. So the quicker you can transition those things, the better.
Right. Would having you or your staff attend any meetings virtually result in any savings in your budget?
Always does.
Okay.
I'm not traveling. I'm not charging my travel time here today, by the way.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, virtual has always been the preference, but you do lose a little bit of the context. But I think at this stage of the game, that would be, we're always trying to do that. So, yes.
Do you see the need to have you and your team present at the ad hoc and TAC meetings?
Depends on, I don't think so, but again, I've never attended a TAC meeting. So I don't know to what extent they need guidance, they need support. I don't know how efficient it is getting action items out of those meetings and then translating them to something that we relate to the consultants or that maybe we have to take care of. I can tell you firsthand, we have tried to minimize how much we touch this project. In fact, we have to. Been boxed in by a very, very constrained budget. So I probably delegate the majority of the work that comes across my desk. And that comes at times with a little bit of inefficiency, but you're trying to weigh the balance of cost and budget. So
how does your budget line up with the 24-25 budget that the board approved in June? I was trying to line up the two.
It is the budget, yeah. Okay. So the line items that we're responsible for in the budget are effectively captured in total in the 142,000. So one of the things that I was going to suggest for Sean is we've spent a great deal of time looking at hours spent and getting very granular on developing how much we think each task is going to take. I would suggest that Sean use that as a starting point in looking at how he would, because we think the hours are correct. I accept the fact that the billing rate is too high. So I think that maybe they can do it faster, and that'll be more opportunities for savings.
So do you bill on a like time and expense basis, or is it lump sum?
We bill on time and materials basis, time and expense, yeah.
Got it.
In quarter-hour increments.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a comment.
Teresa?
The cost of meetings was the first thing that caught my eye when I came to this board and looked at the budget. And back then I made the suggestion that, the manager come online virtual. We've been doing it that way at my sanitation district meetings because our manager is in the Bay Area, and she just hops online on a laptop. And then we just project it on a screen. It's not highly complicated. It's not high tech. It's more affordable than having her drive here. And I really believe that's something we should move forward doing. I know face to face is great, and we can all be here face to face, but as far as staff goes, I think they could just come online, save some bucks there. Also, what does this whole setup cost? Do we need all this grandeur for these meetings? Or can we just go to a room and sit around a table with a laptop?
I forget what our charge is to use this room, but it's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. And usually we have, oh, he is in there. The audio, video, and, he charges and stuff. So I think there are different ways we can, cut back a little bit.
Yeah, we have to kind of decide.
Make do until we get to the point.
Yeah. We have to decide kind of on the value of conducting a meeting that's open and accessible, which I think is really important for something like this because there's so many people involved and we're assessing people money. So I think it's really important that we have this level of visibility and communication. Would the rest of the board agree with me or disagree?
You can go online and everyone can access the meeting online, but 2 people. They could just as well sit in the conference room over at the Willow, you know what I mean, and be just as comfortable. So I'm just kind of brainstorming out loud right now on how we try to save a few bucks. And I don't know the cost of all of this, but I don't see all of this being mandatory, to be honest. Especially once we get that rate, get the rate done and get that through, I think we're going to be pretty low key.
Just to comment from a staff perspective, we've looked at comparative costs of various conference room spaces in Ukiah, and this is equivalent or cheaper than most of the options, unless a member agency staff had a facility that was just available and open to the public. So
Willow does, with the city, you know, we all have rooms that are free. There shouldn't be a cost involved. I mean, if we're only paying $50 for this, fine, you know, great. This is wonderful. I never get to sit in meetings this where I feel so important. You know what I mean? But I'm just thinking out loud.
And I would always prefer to attend virtually as well. I was asked to be here, Teresa, so in person.
That was not a personal comment. Just so you know.
Adam?
Yeah, I just had a question for Harry, that what would it cost us to get to the contract end? Because during our ad hocs, we had City of Ukiah very likely could be tentative to take over. They were thinking January, and there'd be a 3-month transition. You know, March contract ends and we part ways. And so reading this, it said that to get it to the end of the fiscal year 2025, it would cost $98,000 beyond just our current contract, which, you know, doing simple math, the difference is about $7,000, you know, just to get us to the end of the contract. So I'm wondering if that's an accurate assessment.
I think the number is a little bit low. And just to be clear, I really wanted to try to dispel the misimpression that our contract was tied to tasks. It was not. Our contract was really a pot of money that you approved, and then within that, we had fiscal year budgets that we were managing to. And so, if you wanted to extend our contract through the fiscal year, it would be about $102,000. It's when we provided the 98, that was an estimate based on we didn't know what the June billings were going to come in at.
Good. Actually, there's Sean right now. Can we ask Sean if he thinks the City of Ukiah would be ready by January?
Sean, this is kind of probably a critical issue for us, is when can we have the city take over if we have a successful proposal from you?
When could we take over or start doing this? I hate the word takeover. I don't want to be taking over anything. We have a lot of things that we're going to start in January. We discussed this at our work. That's when we'll start operating Willow and Redwood at the same time. And we sort of had an internal conversation whether or not we could assume it. And I do think we can. It will be a very busy window for us, but I don't see that being burdensome.
Okay, so it sounds like what I'm hearing from the group is that we probably don't need to extend our contract through the end of the fiscal year. So that would be the March to June portion, which you have here a budget increase of about $105,000. So we probably don't need that part, right? So that's the first thing I'd ask the board to weigh in on, is are we comfortable having a relationship with West and Yost during the transition time that would be shorter than that, say like ending in March, or what? How do you feel about that?
Through the chair?
Yes.
So I'm just going to ask the question again. You are only billing us for the work that you're asked to do. So if, for example, you have and I think from the information that's been provided, you do fairly well to stick to the budgets for each task, from what I can tell.
To the greatest extent possible.
Right. I mean, they're not wildly variable.
In a perfect world where we're only asked to do what's in the scope of work, yes.
Yeah, I noticed that. So, I mean, I think I understand the chair's concern, but I don't think that we're going to be billed for the full amount if they don't do the work.
That's how I look at it.
So It seems like having that in reserve in the event that the city staff need more time would be prudent. That way, we're not left with a gap. And as Mr. Starkey has said, they only charge us for the work that they do. So I think if, you know, if the chair is in regular communication with our manager about the work that's to be done, I think it could be managed that way. Thank you, Chair.
Other thoughts? Director Crane.
And I believe that they provide a substantial amount of value for their time. So those are, I think that maintaining a relationship with them and having them ready, willing, and able to continue to provide assistance as we request it is to our advantage. So I would like to see us consider maintaining the relationship.
Okay. Other thoughts? Teresa?
The amount of money for the amendment number 1, the $150,000, is that something we have, or are we going to have to go back to all of our agencies and ask for more money?
That, just to clarify, this is what you're referring to on the screen, correct? That has already been completed and passed, that $150,000. That was an amendment that occurred in 2021.
So we're just looking at the 104?
Correct, yeah.
All right.
Or a portion thereof.
Correct.
Not to exceed.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Chris.
And again, this is, excuse my lack of familiarity with all this. Mr. Starkey, can you tell me, how are you directed to do the work that you do? Who is your primary point of contact for what you do?
The board, but I will get separate, like, for example, when Teresa came on board, we spent some time with her, educating her on how the whole financial aspect of the agency worked. And it wasn't significant, but it was time. I've worked with Adam relative to the actual budget that was passed. I take direction from Glenn. Beth Solomon, on times, speaking on behalf of the TAC committee, will provide suggestions and things like that. Ideally, it's coordinated through Glenn, but I think we've been a little bit relaxed about where direction comes from. And that becomes a source of budget drift and scope drift. And so that's why we've, shaped this letter proposal with so many qualifiers, is just to make sure we don't get sideways and make sure that we have we're operating as a team. We're in agreement that this is what we're going to work on, and if it departs from that, we'll have a discussion about budget amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think based on Mr. Starkey's response, that it would be prudent to have there be a singular line of communication between our administrator and our chair to make sure that the work that the consultant is doing is only that's been authorized through the chair, if you're amenable to that.
I think generally that's true. So where a lot of this extra work has come out has been through some of our ad hoc committees and such, where we basically say, okay, Adam, talk with Harry about, the issues and the concerns that you have on our rate and fee study. So we've tried pretty hard to kind of narrow our contact with our consultants through our ad hoc committees or through our meetings, where we've appointed someone to actually have conversations. So it's not sort of random. I mean, there is some level of control and agreement as to who is going to take on a task that engages West and Yost. So it's not a free-for-all.
Yes, I understand that, Mr. Chair. I think going forward, though, if our concern is about managing our budget well, that we should keep the all work that the consultant is proceeding with through a singular line of communication that is yourself as chair, and that way we don't go over budget because the only work that's being done is that which has had the purview of this board in your direction.
Mm-hmm. And I think in general, that's how we've run it. What has kind of been a challenge for us is working through the rate and fee study. That didn't go as smoothly as I would have hoped. And there was a lot of extra work on our part to try to put together, you know, a reasonable fee assessment that required a lot of discussion and extra work from ad hoc committees. So that's why we had some of this contact between members of the board directly with our consultants. Normally it would be me giving direction, or the board collectively giving direction, but there's times where that didn't occur. Teresa?
We've only had Mr. Starkey for 3 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, it was someone else.
Yes.
And it was a completely different ballgame as far as expenses and, you know, work and communication. And it was, I think that's where a lot of the expenses got out of control, was with that person.
Mm-hmm.
That was my main concern. And him not listening to the board, relaying information to our rate study contact that was not what the board's will was, but his own ideas. And I think that led to a lot of going over budget for the rate study and for Yost contract, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. I think we've corrected that. So I think we've got a good system in place for right now. I think we, at the suggestion of Director Watt, that we should try to make sure that communications are going through me, or we authorize communications as a board before we have individual board members engaging with our consultants. And I think that would probably assist in making this a little bit more predictable and affordable.
And clarification. Mr. Watt spoke to communications through the chair. I wonder if it's more appropriate to say communications with the chair as the gatekeeper, because there are some things, speaking with PAC.
Can you lean into your mic a little bit more, Glenn? Sorry.
Speaking to the mic rather than the group gets to be a challenge. Thank you. Anyway, it seems that the chair serving as the gatekeeper, being aware and on point for those expenditures, is probably more appropriate than having the chair be the conduit for all the messages.
I think that's how it's worked. So usually what would happen is that I would have one of the board members, such as Adam or our TAC chair, Beth, call me with concerns, and rather than me trying to remember everything in exact detail to convey to Harry, I would basically give him permission. Why don't you contact Harry, or in the olden days, Eric, and you know, communicate what you're telling me, because it's likely to get lost in translation, and I think it would be more efficient than having everything go directly through the chair for conversations. But certainly I was aware, certainly I would try to authorize that you know, initiation of communications between people who not only had a concern but also had expertise in the area that they wanted to discuss.
Your thoughts on that, Mr. Watt?
Yeah, I understand the nuance. I think the concern is that our consultants aren't working for free, and if they are interacting with member agency staff or through a TAC or an ad hoc, and there are then interactions with individual members of those groups, that's really not coming through the chair. he may have authorized it, but he has no control over it. And so I think all that should happen at these board meetings. That's what they're for. And I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, are you part of the TAC? I'm not sure.
I'm not part of the
Okay.
TAC. We're separate.
Yeah. Do you have a designee that's representing you at the TAC?
Yes. Well, the essentially Beth Solomon, who is the person who's
Okay.
in charge of the TAC, we communicate pretty regularly before
Right.
they have TAC meetings, and so we sort of know what's happening with it. The TAC was originally designed to work specifically with consultants on our GSP, and the TAC tends to be the people who are more technically able, who really, like Sean, like myself when I was working for UC Cooperative Extension, who have expertise in the particular area so that they can, give technical feedback to our consultants to be sure that they're on the right path.
And I think going forward, as far as I can tell, the scope of work that the TAC is going to take on, how is that set? Is that a conversation between the TAC chair and yourself? Or how does that work?
It works between the consultant who is doing whatever task we have, such as Larry Walker and Associates, and they consult with our board, they consult with our administrative consultants who manage the contracts, and then the TAC is appointed to be our representatives for technical information. So that's how it's worked, and I think it's worked pretty successfully. We've gotten through the creation of our GSP working on that basis. But the idea is that we don't take up all the board time, with the minutia of the plan, and yet there's things that need to be considered on a very specialized level to, like, for instance, if they're looking at evapotranspiration rates that would be realistic for crops in our area. That's something that individual board members may not know, but people we appoint to the TAC definitely know. So that's the kind of example of why we use the TAC and why they're important to us.
So I think to answer your question, Mr. Crane, I think having clear understanding of what the role of the different ad hocs, and I guess there's only one ad hoc. I'm not sure what it's about, but I think there's one, and the technical advisory committee. I think if we have our consultants done has put together a proposal that I think is going to try to keep the costs to a minimum based on a very well-defined scope for different tasks, and I think it's up to us through the chair to make sure that we only authorize those things that are necessary for the results we're trying to achieve, and that there be a tighter control on the expenditures going forward.
Well, I can just talk let's hear from.
I was just going to ask, can we pinpoint why we're 75% over budget? So the original contract, it says March 31st, 2025, then we needed a $150,000 increase.
Yeah.
So why?
I'm happy to go into that in any great detail. We put a great deal of effort kind of in the memo and that I sent out, and I thought that was a pretty detailed explanation as to how we got here. And Chris, you're hitting upon a very important part and a function that we provide for this group, and that is coordinating, because we're thinking like you're thinking. We're thinking we want to make sure the direction's coming from Glenn. When we start to see scope drift, we self-reflect on that, we self-report that, and so it's the coordination element of this is, I can't understate the importance and value of that to the GSA. So
I read the memo. So for instance, task number 1, board and committee meeting. Prepare meeting materials, attend meetings, Because maybe other people listening don't have the background here. So assumptions. So are you?
Where are you looking at, Teresa?
Page 2.
Okay.
Cost number 1. Right? So partway through the year, we needed a $150,000 increase. If we look at board and committee meetings, is there something showing me here why did we go over budget there? Why we went over budget there? Right.
I can tell you we had more meetings than were planned, and that was part of the exercise I went through with you several months ago.
Right.
When we tried to get alignment in terms of the budgets that had been approved relative to the contract authorizations that the board also approved. And I don't know if you were in here when I mentioned this, but the $350,000 was basically a pot of money, out of which startup budget was authorized and 2 fiscal year budgets were authorized. And there was never alignment between our contract amendment term and those individual fiscal year budget approvals that the board approved. I think it's very important going forward to get that alignment. I would suggest that with the city of Ukiah, when you execute an agreement with them, execute it across a fiscal year horizon. Have them propose across that horizon. Make sure those are aligned. That's been kind of, I think, where the confusion has occurred between our budgeted authorizations and these contract amendments.
Okay, so 2 questions we have. Do we continue our relationship with West Yost until the end of the fiscal year, or do we end it when the contract ends? That's the first question.
So this agenda has 2 recommended actions under item 4B. What's the difference?
So the first action would be to just authorize us to follow the plan through the fiscal year. And that plan was developed before we had any kind of awareness or knowledge that it was going to be transitioned to City of Ukiah. Our letter proposal does not, I don't know what that's going to take to transition the service. I hope it's pretty simple. It may take time, and so devil's in the details there. That's why I had suggested just a time and materials budget for those transition services, and they can just, the City of Ukiah can call us when they need us. Hey, we have a problem. We're confused on the financials. Can you tell us why this entry was done versus that?
One of these is for the proposal that you've presented in your memo, and once that scope of work, if you will, is completed, and the city needs access to you after that time, you're asking for a time and materials contract.
It's one approach.
Oh, I'm just trying to make sure I understand
that is correct.
Okay,
Yeah, and I apologize for the confusion. Yeah, my understanding was City of Ukiah wasn't ready to take it on right now. You need to continue on in some fashion. Execute our letters proposal, like you rightly state, we're only going to bill when we're directed, and it's on a time horizon. It's not front load billing or anything like that. So that takes care of the letter proposal, kind of keeps us engaged for as long as you want us. And we work on the plan that we've been mentioned. Separate from that, when we need to transition to City of Ukiah, I don't know what that's going to entail. I don't think it would just be a data dump and a file dump. It's going to need to be perhaps some training. Maybe not. I don't know. But that's why, without knowing what their capacity is and what I'm sure they're very skilled and ready to take it on. It's hard for me to price that.
Through the chair. So the letter proposal covers a time horizon to the end of the 2024-25 fiscal year?
Correct.
Or only through March?
Through the end of the fiscal year. Yep.
And if in a hypothetical scenario the city takes over, becomes the administrator, would you expect that the contract that you were operating, if we approved it today, that you operated under to that time period would stop, and then a T&M contract would start? Is that kind of how that would work?
I hadn't thought about it that deeply, but I thought that there might be some parallel things. We'd still be operating the GSA, we'd still be doing the admin, we'd still be doing things that are in the letter proposal. And at some point, coterminous with that, we would start transitioning to City of Ukiah, but they would both be operating simultaneously. There wouldn't be a stop, and I envision probably some overlap.
So would your letter proposal that you've given us cover the transition or not?
No, the letter proposal did not anticipate any work related to transition services.
Right. So I'm just trying to understand that. So if the tasks in the letter proposal are no longer necessary, then you wouldn't be billing against those.
Correct. You could theoretically have headroom to absorb transition services, yes.
Right. So,
but again, that's where it gets.
We don't know.
I don't know, and that's where it gets
Understood.
kind of goofy because all of a sudden I'm out of scope.
Right.
And we've tried to be very prescriptive to, for good reasons.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. So,
Is it oversimplifying it to say that if we approve this to the end of the fiscal year, but we transitioned in January, the city takes on the responsibility of being the administrator, we have a month or two of transitioning, right? Maybe it's not till the end of the fiscal year, but because we're no longer giving them work, they no longer have work, they're no longer billing, right? So it doesn't really matter. The contract doesn't obligate us to give them a lump sum of money or a certain amount of money. We only pay what we're billed. So isn't it conceivable to go ahead and approve this till June as a worst case scenario? But, if really you're only doing work for us until March, we won't receive any further bills from you between March and June.
Exactly.
I would also add, just procedurally, no action is necessarily needed on that 4B2 item in terms of the time and materials. We could bring that back as West Yost, pending further discussions with the city as we get a better sense of what that transition looks like. We would need direction and likely approval on 4B1 before the next board meeting, just based off of our current budget. What's remaining in the current contract in terms of budget.
Harry, what tasks are going to happen between now and say the end of the year? So we have another meeting in October to get through, and what other things have to be done?
Well, there's the matter of GSP implementation and oversight. There's, at some point, we're going to have to weigh in on the Gobi well and produce some sort of document from the GSA stating that it's not going to affect adjacent wells, which I think is fairly simple, and a lot of the groundwork for doing that has been done. It's unknown what the response will be when the bills hit the streets. Hopefully it's low fanfare and everybody's okay with their bills, but I do anticipate petitioning. And there will be inaccuracies that we have to address on a case-by-case basis. We've quantified that in our letter proposal, and so it puts us in that situation where I can't remember how many petitions we said, but If we said 4 and we get a 5th, we're going to come back and ask for more money. And any meetings you might have. Ongoing support of the finances, so consultant invoices come in. We have to approve them, submit them to Amber. Off the top of my head.
I would add, Harry, just to expand
Yeah.
on the list, any contract management as directed by the board. So that would be contract development with the city of Ukiah pending board direction, with Larry Walker pending board direction, and any others with West Yost. General fiscal management and tracking is an ongoing service that's provided. We will also be developing direct bills for those parcels that are unable to have their fee be placed on property tax bills. And management of that direct billing is especially complicated in the first year of fee implementation, since addresses that are on the tax rolls associated with those parcels don't necessarily always line up based off of our experience with Sonoma County. And then there's always unexpected things, I would say, that come up in terms of GSA administration. As you are all aware, whether that's new well referrals aside from the Gobi well coming in, or other opportunities that come up.
Director Kane?
And I would add one more thing. We recently equipped a couple wells, I think maybe even 3, with transducers for remote monitoring, real-time monitoring. And those things can tend to take a little bit of a life of their own, getting landowner consent agreements signed and legal agreements signed. There's back and forth on that because they want to edit the language a little bit, make modifications to the agreement. So that interactive process is just something that takes time. So.
Sorry, one more thing. We have a TAC meeting scheduled for September and December, along with the board's October board meeting. So any support that's needed for those meetings.
Director Crane.
It appears to me that both of those points that they've offered are where we're likely to wind up. I think it makes sense for us to proceed with both of those proposed items from current management group, and then be judicious in the application cost drivers. But having them in place, maintaining the relationship, so we have that resource available to us is, I think, prudent.
Well, I think so too, because there are things we have to get done. So Harry gave us a great list. So we can see things that are going to be ongoing. I think it will be difficult going through a transition time when we actually implement billing the general public that are inside of our jurisdiction for groundwater fees. And we're going to need somebody to answer the questions promptly, and it's not going to be individual board members fielding the calls. So we have to have a staff in place until the city of Ukiah is ready to go online with this. So
I apologize for interrupting.
Sure.
I do want to temper your expectation about calls that may come in. We've spoken about this candidly on many occasions, that our experience, for example, in one of the Sonoma GSAs was that, and again, it's not a fair analog, because there we let them know something was coming. We sent out a notice to all people that would be receiving a tax bill. We had to set up a phone bank because we had 200 phone calls in the first day.
2 weeks, I would say. We had
2 weeks,
300
okay.
calls over the first 2 weeks when we implemented the Sonoma County fees.
Fair enough, but we're not set up to handle that. And we in speaking with the transition ad hoc committee, the vision was that we would be pitching all those calls to the board and to Beth and Sean to return back, because you have the relationships in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So this may just be hypothetical. It may not be something that actually occurs, but our budget does not anticipate a great deal of public outreach in that regard. We were going to rely on the board and people at the TAC to do that.
Which I would add as the strategy we did take in Sonoma County. Their member agency staff responded to the vast majority of those calls, with GSA staff being forwarding those calls on and delegating them as appropriate.
And one last thing, we're not making you walk the plank by yourself. We did prepare a script that you will all have, so that you can speak from what is a GSA, why is Sigma important, just the basic questions. And we've also updated the FAQs on the website to reflect the fact that these bills are going to go out, so that people can go there and answer some of these questions.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to anticipate that. It's another item that's not on this agenda today, but I think in an October meeting it would be prudent for us to have a plan.
I'm glad you think so. I have to really thank Indigo for pointing out the importance of this, because after our last board meeting, it was something that she said, this is a potential headwind that we're not really budgeted for, we don't really have a plan in place, is what do we do if we get inundated with a bunch of phone calls? So.
To the chair. So I noticed the proposal has about 35 hours for stakeholder outreach and communication. Is that expected to contribute towards public inquiries in regards to the fees on the tax bills?
See what we were thinking there. Yeah.
Or was it just like, putting a press release into the local newspapers or to inform the public?
So in that task, we included reviewing and responding to public inquiries by phone and email, developing outreach materials to facilitate stakeholder outreach and communications, and conduct external outreach meetings to communicate important GSA activities. I think most of those hours were in task 5.3, but there are a handful of hours that I think will help with that effort.
What's the other outreach?
I think we had envisioned a meeting later in the fiscal year to just continue the practice that the GSA has done, and that is meeting with the public, explaining why we're doing this, where we're going. I guess I could characterize it as optional, but it's been part of the practice of the GSA to hold workshops to educate the public.
Yeah, and it's been fairly robust over the course of the organization. Adam?
The outreach is actually one of the requirements from DWR. They want us to continue to do stakeholder engagement and outreach. So part of that is just a placeholder for that.
Yeah, it seems that if we're having a major action here with the public and where the rubber hits the road in terms of the public paying for the GSA, which is not something they've done directly, that we should put our resources into having that be the engagement. And if to the degree we can not go outside of that and put those hours into interacting with the public that's directly paying for the GSA, rather than have something extra outside of that, as long as that'll satisfy the requirements of plan implementation.
Well, I would suggest that we, again, use the experiences of other GSAs that have implemented fees and kind of come up with a plan based on that. So the public outreach is going to be done a variety of ways. It's going to be the meetings, maybe, or a meeting, but it's also going to be responding to phone calls, because when people get their bills, they're going to go, what the heck is this? So we have to be prepared with a script, with a way of fielding the calls and making a decision who's going to be our point people on that. And I think it will come down to the board members and public agencies that are part of our JPA, rather than the consultant, to answer those questions. But
yeah, when you get your tax bill the school district was an enormous amount of tax on my bill. It had a phone number right next to the tax amount. that would, yeah, so I mean, we could take that and, get a.
That is a requirement of all direct charges that are on a property tax bill, is that there's a phone number associated with it. And so we have been working with the Mendocino County Auditor or Tax Collector's Office to have the GSA phone number be the call log, which is why we did a kind of phone bank operation. So all calls will come into the GSA, and then we can pass on responses to those phone calls to member agency staff and to board members.
So when you say GSA though, like what phone number is that? Because the GSA doesn't have an office, right?
We have a digital phone number that the agency has subscribed and paid for so that we can hand that off to the city of Ukiah should that be the direction. So.
Okay. Well, that's always a joy to call a phone number and get a recording when it's, no, I went through it. So.
Yeah, well, these are things I think we can take up in the October meeting, but right now, we've got this budget in front of us here that we have to make a decision on.
I'm kind of in favor of just agreeing to extending it to June, but knowing we won't be billed, we're only billed for what's done.
Kind of a time
needed.
and materials approach.
Right, exactly.
Does that sound reasonable to
That's
people?
I feel comfortable with that, and it's always good to have a plan B. You know? I know it's not ideal, the amount of money we're spending, but I don't see what else to do.
Any other thoughts? Anybody ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to move the recommended action.
Okay, anyone care to second?
Can someone read the recommended action, please?
The recommended action in front of you is to approve the West Yost letter proposal and contract amendment to continue administrative services until the transition is made to the city of Ukiah or through June 2025, whichever comes first.
Second.
Okay, is there an understanding on this that it's basically a time and materials that this is about budget, but we spend as?
It's no departure from how our practices.
Okay.
None of our contracts have been lump sum or front loaded. We bill as we work on the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
No need to amend then?
No.
Okay, any further discussion from the board?
Through the chair. Yeah, thanks for the presentation and answering the questions, Mr. Starkey. And I think as long as we have good communication between our administrator and the board through the chair about the work being done, I'm comfortable with this.
Okay. Any comments from the public before we take our vote? Anything online? All right, I'll call for the question then.
Ready for roll call?
Yes.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin.
Aye.
Director Watt.
Aye.
And Chair McCourty.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Gotta find my script. So we just finished item 4.
Just for the record, that was item 4B1. I don't know if the board wants to consider or make an action on item 4B2, which was the concept of the time and materials for transition services that could extend beyond. I know there were some questions around that. We could also bring that item back at a future meeting, pending for more information regarding the transition.
Director Crane.
It's my understanding that item is also, it's putting something in place that can be used but doesn't necessarily drive cost by simply saying we want this in our toolkit.
Yes.
With that said, I move that we approve that.
Discussion from other board members? Or a second? This basically would continue our relationship with West Yost as needed for technical services, correct?
That's correct. And if Sean's not going to be calling me before the October meeting to start the transition, Obviously, nothing needs to be done, but in the event that that would take place, it's probably worth having something in place so we can have a discrete job code to bill that time to. The only other thing I would say is, do you want to put an amount not to exceed in that recommendation?
I would trust the chair paying attention to it, serve that purpose.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I'd like to hear from Mr. White if he's amenable. I know it may be premature, but I think trying to get a sense of what we think the level of effort that West Yost will need to make outside of the scope we just approved to support a transition to the city.
It's all so tentative right now. I think that's really hard for me to answer, but I can't imagine there's going to be like a hard stop and a hard start. I'm definitely going to need to lean on Harry and his people for at least a minute as we change gears. So even if the city quote starts on January 1st, it's not going to be like a complete, we'll definitely need their help getting a handle on things.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to make the distinction between a winding down of West Yost and a winding up at the city for the scope that's needed to run the GSA versus a level of assistance that West Yost provides to the city to get up to speed. I see those as different things, maybe, or are we just making them different things for the sake of distinguishing how West Yost charges us?
They sound like the same thing to me, honestly. Whether it's winding down or winding up or whatever you want to call it, there's just going to have to be some overlap during what I would say January to Marchish or whatever to make that smooth and so people feel whole in both directions as we transition, if that's what you decide to do.
This provides a continuing resource which would not exist if this one accepted.
Right, but I'm making the distinction that there's work this contract authorizes work outside of the budget we just approved that occurred during the same time frame that the scope of work that we just approved is being executed. So it's additional costs outside of the scope of work we just approved during the same time period that the scope of work we just approved is being executed.
Question, is that additional work, or is it work that falls in one rather than the other? I think that having this agreement isn't creating additional work. I think it's segregating that work, and it provides something beyond the time frame of the one we already passed.
I don't think that's what I heard.
Well,
yeah, I had envisioned we keep running the GSA for as long as you want us and until City of Ukiah is ready to take it over. Separate from that, we're going to be spending some time training. We're going to, and so you are right, Director Watt, in terms of my interpretation of what we're trying to convey. And I would encourage you to think about the term of that on-call contract to be that we're there to help Sean whatever he needs to help. If he needs to pick up a phone call and talk to me for 15 minutes about a line item in the budget, or how did we do this, something historical or procedural, you can do that. Again, we're not going to be billing time unless we're requested.
If I may follow that up. My point is that if West Yost is called upon under the existing agreement, the number one, if they're called on to do a task there, or they're called on to do the same task in the other one, it's still the same task, it's still the same amount of effort. So the description that we've been given about the training, if we didn't exercise the second one, that would still occur, but it would fall into the first one. Because, in other words, if we don't exercise the second one, does that mean that they won't answer questions and bill us for the time that? Yeah.
I mean, in the end of the day, I would like to just kind of echo what Teresa said. Since Harry has been here, it's been a much more civilized thing. And I don't know if it really matters what bucket we put it in. I don't think Harry is going to rack up a giant bill just because you said okay today, even if we never call for their help. I think as we move forward, if we need help, and we likely will need help, it'd be nice to have that available. And if it's a huge effort, then it may cost us some money to transition. And if it's a small effort, it may cost us very little to do that. But I think and again, I'm not really concerned about what bucket it's in, but I think we should plan on having access to them for a while as we move over, if we choose to do that.
Okay. Teresa?
We just stick with the budget that we just proposed, and then any transitioning could fall under as requested administrative service. I mean, the line item's in there, right, on the budget. We don't, and then if...
We did not price in our letter proposal any transition. That's not in, and with all due respect, Teresa, we've been criticized about our costs, and it's actually boxed us in to be very prescriptive about what we will work on and what we won't work on. And that's for the protection of the GSA, it's for our protection, and we're a team trying to work this out together. So I would prefer to have a separate contracting mechanism for transition services, just so that you can know what it took. And we have ideas about what we think that'll take. I'm with Sean. I don't think it'll take a lot to get 90% there. It's that last 10% that can linger.
So you want a separate contract and a separate bucket of money just so it can be looked at?
And managed by you, exactly.
And then, so we would only look at your hourly cost and the hourly cost of your staff at those would be the only expenses within that bucket, right?
I think
I mean, I can't imagine.
100% of the transition will be West Yost, I'm thinking, yeah.
So I guess my thought, I guess we could put it in a separate bucket, but my thought was we just authorize $104,000. You know what I mean? Why can't we just use that instead of authorizing another $40,000?
We're falling into the trap of not being discreet with our budgets and terms, because our scope of work was very prescriptive. We counted the number of petitions. You know, none of our scope anticipates transition services.
Yeah, but that 104 is supposed to take us out until June.
Correct.
So we're looking at ending it in March, so we would have 3 months of budget left.
But my scope of work doesn't include any time allocated to the transition services.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, is that when you look at what has West Yost proposed to do, it doesn't include transition services, so we need to have a category for that. We don't have to set an amount at this time. We could bring that back for the October meeting if that would make the board more comfortable. But I think we should say, yes, there will be a cost for transition services, and yes, we should have an item that, the bucket of money that you can go to for that. That makes sense, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that we do need to, because if we don't, and we just say, well, you might be able to afford it out of the extra 104,000, but what if they don't? Then we're going to end up budgeting more money anyway. So at least now, if we do, and I mean, I think we should set an amount, if nothing else, just to kind of keep us boxed in, saying, okay, not that I think West Yost is gonna go crazy and write a bunch of checks and say, well, you didn't set a limit, but I think that we should, just so that we do acknowledge that this could cost us more. Hopefully it doesn't, but.
Are you comfortable with that, Teresa?
I mean, I definitely think there needs to be a mechanism to track it and to have it separate from actual GSA work, you know. I'm just cautious about authorizing another budget.
I know, we all are.
But this is a great trial balloon for Sean to manage a consultant within a defined budget. And we're not going to do anything on transition services until I get a phone call from Sean.
Well, and I trust you. Unlike in the past with, you know, other people, I trust you, and I appreciate all your time and wisdom and listening to this board and helping us. Just so you know, I value you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
I had another comment.
Yes.
Well, I think it'll just kind of give us a little bit of a chance to test drive Sean and the city of Ukiah as well. You know, we set them a budget, and it'll be their trial run to see if they stick within that budget.
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
No,
personally. but
he has a vested interest in managing the cost to budget. So,
and looking at his track record of some of the recent activities the city of Ukiah has done, I think he knows how to stay in budget and work with vendors. So.
I restate the motion.
Go ahead.
I made the motion before. I'm stating it again. Is there a second?
What was it just the recommended action, or did we attach not to exceed?
I'm comfortable with the chair keeping a lid on it.
Maybe at the October meeting, we'll come back with
a number.
With a number.
Yeah.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's 5,000, 10,000, or 20, and Sean, you might think about that. Just
The recommended action is to increase the budget and come back with it in October.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Any further discussion? Any public comment?
Yeah, what's going to come back in October?
The number.
So the recommended action that I have heard, to summarize, is that West Yost will return with this item at the October board agenda with a proposed contract with a time and with a deadline as well as a not to exceed.
Yeah.
A term of the agreement, sorry.
Provides an opportunity for city staff to sort through what they think their needs are, discuss that a bit with West Yost, come up with a value.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns?
So this contract would start immediately, or not until October?
It'll start when you sign it, and my thought is we'd wait after the October board meeting. We'll have a not to exceed amount in it, whether it's $10,000 or $20,000. I don't know.
And the expectation is that as the city's working on their proposal, that they're going to need your assistance.
Yes.
And okay.
We'll show them the platforms, how we're managing data currently.
Yep.
And files, we'll have to put together a file structure of all the historical documents, et cetera.
Yeah, I think to the degree that there can be some, to the degree we can put a scope of work around that and have it relatively defined, I think would be good. So perhaps more than just a not to exceed, but maybe some description of what that is, if what you think the city's going to need help with. It doesn't need to be expansive.
No, it won't be. It'll largely just mirror kind of the tasks that we have in our current letter proposal, because that's really the roadmap for managing the GSA.
Remember, he's $300 an hour. Don't give him too much work.
Okay. Any public comments before we vote on this item? Be none, so with that, I think we're ready to call the question.
Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin. Aye. Director Watt.
Aye.
Chair McWherty.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, so item 4C is the contract amendment for Larry Walker Associates to initiate the well inventory study. Okay, so Harry?
So this was put on the agenda at the request of the TAC, and it authorizes a contract amendment for LWA to initiate the well inventory study. This is the first phase of a larger study that is priced roughly at about $200,000. And I think this contract amendment is to start that work, give them a notice to proceed, and the amount, I'm sorry, I don't have it in my notes, but I think it's $40,000 and change. So
Do we have someone from Larry Walker here to discuss it?
Hello, good morning, members of the board. Audra Bardsley here from Larry Walker Associates. Yeah, so this was on the direction of the TAC, and among the recommendations that were made, reviewing the letter that was received from DWR, providing approval for the GSP, but identifying recommended corrective actions, and also indicating that DWR would like the GSA to continue pursuing the identified updates in the GSP, among which was a well inventory. So this represents a first phase. It will be up to the board and the TAC to direct us any further work that might be done in subsequent years. This would be really focused on a desktop exercise. So we would be setting up a spatial database similar to what we've done in some other basins where we've been engaged in well inventory work. We'd be going through scraping the public databases, engaging with different local agencies and entities, NGOs, in order to improve and enhance the information available for locations of wells, and then well completion information that's important for the integrated hydrologic model. So that's going to help us understand where water should be simulated being pumped out of the ground, so where spatially, but also from what depth, which aquifer we might actually be accessing when doing so, and where possible, we're hoping to get some additional geologic information. All of this will help us to better understand sort of the dynamics in the basin and where pumping is likely to, or likely not to, maybe influence or interfere with surface waters. And so this again is kind of a first step, setting up our spatial database, improving the information that's available, conducting these desktop exercises, also identifying further data gaps that exist, and then recommendations on how those might be filled in the future should the GSA choose to pursue that path. We had identified in the Sigma implementation grants some additional activities like public meetings, development of an official survey in multiple languages in order to engage with the public and solicit specific information from them, from well owners. So that would be pushed down for a later phase. There were also some tasks related to update of the model and then production of different simulations and maps, and some actual in-field activities to verify well construction details in important areas if there were identified data gaps. So all of that would be down the road. Again, this first phase is really focused on desktop exercises, establishment of this database, and improvement of the information that's incorporated into the model. Happy to answer any questions.
I'll just make a comment that I know that in our discussions over the past year, this is seen as a real high priority data gap to address. And I think it's something that will really help us understand where the aquifer is really under a lot of pressure in terms of people removing water from it. And I think it's important for us to do this. The director comments?
Do you think it's important for us to do this right now and not wait for a little better economy?
You know, I think it is because of the fact that the the clock is kind of ticking on us with the state to improve our groundwater sustainability plan, and this is one of the things that we can show as a direct action that we're undergoing to better understand and refine our model. So, and it's relatively affordable compared to some of the other things that we could be doing. So I don't know how other directors feel, but that's my opinion. Director Gasca.
Yeah, I mean, it's already in our budget. I mean, we're already planning on spending this money. It is probably one of the most important things I think that we can do right now, because even in terms of the rate and fee study, just because we didn't have this information, we were really limited on how we were how we're going to charge people.
So it was already budgeted, so we're not looking at any budget increases at this point. We're just looking at engaging them for the first part of the study.
Instead of putting it out, you know, we're just basically contracting directly with Larry Walker and Associates, who we already work with.
Director Crane.
And this action is to arrange for a proposal to see if it fits within the budget and to determine if we want to proceed with it or not. So this isn't the actual approving the expenditure.
Is that correct, Audra?
Yeah, so at this stage, my understanding, and perhaps Harry can speak to this, or Sarah, my understanding is that we have proposed a scope of work that we think is feasible given the budget of $40,500 for the coming fiscal year that was approved by the board, and that if the board so feels necessary, we would then engage with West Yost regarding contracting and making an amendment official. But at this stage, this is only to bring it to the board to understand what direction should be sought.
Yeah, Audra's correct, and we would be bringing forward the contract for formal approval at the October board meeting is the current proposal.
I guess I'm confused because in the recommended action, it says direct the general manager to return to the October meeting with an LWA contract amendment to increase the budget.
The LWA budget.
And the body would have to approve that amendment.
So it's in our budget, it's not just it's just switching the line, right, from something else to LWA? Is that what we're talking about?
Our budget had this amount approved in it, as Director Gasca referenced, and I apologize for the confusion. We're talking about amending the LWA budget for work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So our overall budget, just a line item switch, right? We're switching that money from wherever it is to LWA or from you to LWA?
No, we're authorizing them to expend a budgeted expense. That's what we're doing.
That we already included in our budget.
Correct.
We're asking them for a proposal to determine whether we want to expend those dollars.
To them.
In this motion. This is not to spend it. This is to get offer for the service specifically. This is requesting a proposal.
Yep. I see that Beth Solomon has her hand raised. Beth?
Good morning again, everyone. Just as a reminder, I'm the chair of our Technical Advisory Committee. The intention of the TAC committee was that that Larry Walker and Associates begin the well inventory study as soon as possible. The board did budget the funding, and what we're asking now is for the board to direct Larry Walker to begin immediately because they are ready to begin. This is a timely step in the full study. And in the October meeting, ratify and finalize all of that through the contract amendment. There is currently room in the LWA contract to begin the work. It does describe GSP implementation, so this falls under that, but they will need that budgeted funding to do the complete work, and they can begin now, which is what we are recommending.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Dr. Watt?
Yeah, maybe it's just the wording here. So is it, Mr. Starkey, is it true that LWA has a contract with the GSA that includes a scope of work for the well inventory study, but the budget for that study was determined to be insufficient, or there was some there was a budget for it that was applied to some other tasks, and now we're coming back and, again, can you maybe explain that?
Yeah, so it actually started with the Budget Ad Hoc Committee. They presented me with numbers for the different categories, including the well inventory study. And what Audra has done is prepared a scope of work that fits within that approved amount of money, the $40,500. Have that all right, Audra?
That is, and is it okay if I further clarify really quickly,
Please do.
Harry, to
Yeah.
assist? So yeah, so it is not, Director Watt is not presently in our scope of work for our current contract to complete this first phase of the well inventory. I think as Harry mentioned a moment ago, that was intended to go out for RFQ. I think that there was some discussion, I believe Beth and the TAC and others were realizing that perhaps there could be an opportunity to direct LWA using the technical support item in our contract and use that as an opportunity to get LWA started on the well inventory. So this would be to add amend our current contract to include this scope of work and budget. I'm sorry, Harry, thank you for letting me chime in quickly.
Okay.
That answer?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, we already have a contract with LWA to aggregate all the monitoring data, to put it together, to update the hydrological model, and to put together our annual reports to DWR. So they're not tasked with doing this, but since we already work with them, that's the recommendation, that we just add on to allocate funds that we've already budgeted to add to their contract.
Where are these budgeted funds? What line item are they in right now that we're shifting them over to their contract?
I
just wanna make sure.
Fiscal year 2024, 2025 annual budget, project and management actions, RFQ, well inventory study, 40,560. It's on the website.
Through the chair, I think I got my question answered. So, so there was some. The LWA contract has a general category for technical assistance that is being used to start the well inventory study or something like that, and that the actual budget for it that needs to be allocated is 40,000. So how much of the general category budget, how much of that is going to be used for the well inventory study? Are we talking just a few $1,000s, or is it a big number? I'm not sure.
I can't speak to that. And Audra, maybe a way to characterize this is I think LWA is willing to take this on at risk. In an ordinary setting, they'd want this approval made and have it in hand. There's enough bandwidth within their existing contracting authority, like ours is, to kind of start the work at risk, but then that contracting mechanism will be perfected when you authorize the 40,500 amendment.
Right. I guess I'm just being cautious that, are we using as needed or general services that we'd like to keep in reserve for the well inventory study, when really it should just all be under the well inventory study? I guess maybe, is it Audra? Audra, can you shed some light on that?
I hope so. And I see that Amber Fizette with the county also has her hand up.
Yeah.
So I want to give her an opportunity in just a moment. So this is my understanding, is that I was directed to develop a scope that would fit within this $40,500 budget that was approved by the board for fiscal year 24-25. And my understanding is that if we do receive a notice to proceed today, we will go ahead and get started. Again, we have enough banked in this flexible technical support category to get started until the $40,500 contract amendment would be approved in October. And so this is sort of a good faith to get started if the board directs us to do so, and that we would not be actually using any of these flexible funds for technical support. long-term towards the well inventory. This is just sort of to get us started immediately, start making progress until such a time that we actually get the fully approved contract amendment. Again, if the board decides to go in that direction.
Through the chair, procedurally, if you so choose, and if it's simpler in your understanding, you could choose to authorize administrative staff to work with Larry Walker to execute that agreement today. And in that case, we wouldn't need to bring the contract amendment at the October board meeting. We just didn't have enough time prior to this meeting today, since it was a special meeting, to actually have a contract that was ready for signature to present to you today. But if you so choose to direct staff in that direction, then no action would necessarily be needed at the October board meeting. And that might simplify this conversation of what bucket LWA is pulling money from.
Okay, let's hear from Amber. Amber, go ahead.
I actually just realized I'm looking at last year's contract, but if this year's contract is the same way, it's basically all one bucket for on-call technical consulting services. And so there isn't a specific amount applied to individual tasks, as long as this year's is the same. And so, as long as they don't exceed the entire budget of the contract, they can just perform the beginning of this under the on-call technical consulting services. And then the entire amount needed for this project can be added with an amendment. So that was kind of said in several different pieces, but that's my understanding. So you would actually be authorizing this work today under their on-call services, but then an amendment would need to be done to add the full amount needed. And so it would sort of pay back the general on-call consulting services once you do the amendment.
Okay, is that clear to everybody?
Through the chair. Yeah. It seems to me that we should keep the well inventory study in the well inventory study bucket and not be spending down money in our general category, since that really is just going to end up increasing the budget for the well inventory study. And we have a $40,000 budget, so why don't we stick to it, the way I'm seeing it. So if we can authorize them to get started today and preserve our general technical services budget, that would be my preference.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to make a proposal then?
You're just basically asking them to account for it a certain way. Doesn't it? Right. So
Right.
they're just going to account for, it's their accounting, how they, because we don't dump money into their buckets. We just pay them and they account for it to us. So we're just asking them to account for the money separately.
Yeah, that's not my understanding, is that we have two buckets. One's for general, and now we're adding a new bucket called well inventory. And what I'm hearing is that they want to spend down the general bucket until we approve the well inventory bucket. And my thinking is, why spend down the general bucket? Let's keep that bucket.
I like that approach better.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd be in favor of approving the scope of work for the LWA contract and approving the chair to sign a contract for that $40,500 as soon as possible.
Yep.
Yes, and just make sure it's not to exceed.
Yeah.
So if you have a not to exceed, it doesn't matter what bucket it comes out of, right? It's not to exceed that.
Well, no, I don't think that's the case, because it's the scope of work. So if they use money from a general category for a scope of work, then that depletes that money. And there may be other things that come up that we want to use that for. So, yeah, I mean, I'll make the motion to approve the expanded scope of work and authorize the chair to sign an agreement for the $40,500 for the well inventory study, and to direct our consultant to not spend the general technical services money on that.
I'll second that.
That was to authorize it today.
Any further discussion?
Discussion, yes. if I'm understanding correctly, there's a bucket with a certain amount of money in it. I viewed this item as getting some hard numbers or harder numbers to determine what portion of that budget may be used for this purpose. So it may not be appropriate to simply turn it all loose. If we follow the recommended action and get from them the scope and the dollars, then we can compare that with that budget rather than turn it all loose.
Didn't she say she prepared she prepared the scope of work to meet that budget?
Yeah.
So that's already been done, right?
It is a defined scope of work.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
So it would not exceed that amount, but it might not consume all that amount either.
In which case you.
I'm not going to hold my breath on that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you rely on professional people to be professional. And if in their study it turns out that it doesn't consume all that, then hopefully they would be upfront and point out that there is something like that, depending upon the detail that, I mean, we trust the consultants and these people to be honorable in that regard.
Yeah, well, we have a long-term relationship with Larry Walker and Associates, so I think that that's proven to be the case in the past, so.
So you're agreeing with this motion then, correct? Right? Are you agreeing with the motion? Do you know?
Director Crane, yes.
I'm not agreeing that we should turn it loose so all of it can simply be expended for this without knowing what they think it's going to cost, which I thought this is about. Am I missing something?
Only the nuance that it is a defined scope. And so you would, just to layer on to the suggested motion by Director Watt, it would be a budget of the amount of $40,500 to perform the scope of work as detailed by LWA for phase 1 of the well inventory study.
And what if in the preparation that was laid out here, they found that was in excess of the amount of money, not in excess, the bucket was bigger than the task, then what?
Well, I assume they would come to you and say that we have available budget to take on task 2, the second phase.
So it
She's
seems
nodding.
that
She's nodding. So we.
She's nodding.
Yeah.
Yes. So as long as that step occurs, then I think we're fine.
Put it in the
I don't want to see
contract
us
amendment.
just say all of it goes away for this task.
Again, like us, they don't lump sum bill. They would bill on a time and materials basis. And the converse of that is true as well. If their scope of work was more ambitious than the allocated budget, they're going to come back to the board and say, we need more money. And then you can decide, yeah.
I agree with that.
If I may, through the chair.
Sure, go
I just
ahead.
wanted to point it out too that at least what we have tentatively budgeted over a 5-year projection is that it would take more than 1 year. So this is just budgeting money to begin the project, ASAP. But, with our 5-year outlook, we have tentatively $97,200 budgeted fiscal year 25-26, and then $71,680 for fiscal year 26-27. So this is just to start the process, the beginning.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table.
And a second.
And a
We have
And a
both.
second, so I think we're ready to call the question.
Any public comment on this item?
Evidently
Okay.
not, so.
Roll call then. Director Crane.
Aye.
Director Gasca.
Aye.
Director McNerlin. Aye. Director Watt.
Aye.
And Chair McCordy.
Yes. Thank you very much. Motion carries. So now we're on to the consent items. I would request a motion to approve consent calendar unless there's any items to be pulled for consideration.
Second.
Okay.
And just for those online, Director Crane made the motion and Director Gasca made the second.
Okay. Any public comment on consent items? If not, call for the question.
Director Crane?
Aye.
Director Gasca?
Aye.
Director McNerlin?
Aye.
Director Watt?
Aye.
Chair McWordy?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, we're on to item 6, which is the future agenda items.
I think we've noted several of them in the course of the meeting, and we will capture those and properly agendize the next meeting in October.
Okay, that sounds good. With that, I think we're ready to adjourn. Okay, thank you. Thank you we were more or less on time considering our late start, so we did it all in 2 hours, so thank you, everybody. And thanks to everybody who came to attend the meeting as well. All right.